So we are learning chapter 2 of Shar Yichud Ve'emuna, which means the gate of faith and trust. Chapter 1. So what we're doing in these chapters is it's a very short book. It's 12 chapters versus the other book that we just finished studying is 53 chapters. So it's short in comparison. And each chapter is also not very long. What I'm noticing is that it's like a scaffolding, step by step, one understanding it all by itself, kind of isolating each understanding into step by step. So in the last chapter, we isolated the understanding that Hashem creates the world through the letters of the Aleph Bet. And we're going to take it to the next step, this chapter, chapter 2. So chapter 1 is taught us. We started with a question. We said, what does it mean to say that, well, we actually started with giving us like the abstract of the entire book, which is to understand the Shema. But then we asked a question and we said, what does it mean to say that God is, it's in the Aleinu, Hi Hashem hu Elokim ein od milvado. There's none like him. So that God is our God and there's no other God. There's no one else. What does that mean? The simple understanding is that there's no other gods, idols, right? We don't worship idols. But actually, what this book is going to tell us is that it means a lot more than that. And in order to understand what it means that there's no other besides God, as in no other, spoiler alert, there's no other existence at all, in order to understand that, we need to understand the nature of our existence. So the first layer of understanding the nature of our existence, the world and everything, is to understand that the world is being created through a constant flow of energy that's coming through the letters of the Aleph Bet. And the source of this is from the Psalms that King David wrote, where he says, "Forever, O God, your word stands firm in the heavens." And what does that mean? The Baal Shem Tov, who's the father of the Hasidic movement and understanding, explains that your word is the 10 utterances. This means that when you start studying the Torah from Bereshit, from Genesis, it says, if you recall, it says, God says, let there be light, let there be a firmament, let there be, and let there be, and let there be. So there are 10 of them. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So what does it mean that your word of these 10 utterances, these 10 let there be's, stands firm in the heavens? It's actually le'olam, means forever stands firm in the heavens. It means that these words are, in a sense, constantly being said by God. It is not that God said them one time, one and done, and then just the world exists and we're here. It's that God is constantly willing this world into existence. And I'm actually curious if you have come across this idea and concept before, yes, last chapter 1's Tanya class.
Well, when we say, like, if whatever will be done, he can do whatever. So I guess that I don't think about it that logic that it's constant, but yeah, that it must be a constant thing, if then it could just not be.
Yeah, that's very...
God breathed into, right? It was like through breath or whatever.
So our souls come through breath, but our existence comes through speech. It's a very good point. So I'm hearing you say that retroactively, if we are going to be living our lives with Hashem constantly in our life, what that is actually meaning is back that up, that God is actually recreating the world every second. And you're exactly accurate with that. We're actually going to go, that's like backwards, right? Mm-hmm. But what you're actually ahead of the game. You're coming from a place of this enlightenment, already understanding that, and then you can live your life like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
what I hear from it, I don't hear this. I just hear that he created the world, and that's it. He stopped there, and now we just existing.
And this is very conventional thought. Mm-hmm. This is what it's normal to think.
I mean,
and that's why
it's otherwise, but this is what I hear from the world.
From the world.
And then that's it. And he stepped away.
He made the world, and that's it. Like, you guys
so I'm not saying that.
Whatever.
Yeah. What I'm saying, what the Tanya is saying, and what the Baal Shem Tov said, is that if God were to create the world once, it would exist for that moment, and that's it. In order for the world to constantly be here, it has to be constantly willed into existence through speech.
But where is the change?
Well, I think...
I don't see any change.
What do you mean?
You don't mean it?
where is the change if he continue creating it? There is no change.
Change from what?
From what?
From what he created million years ago.
There's so much change.
Where is the change?
That's true.
Human created the change.
No, we're a tiny blip.
Where is the change? The
So
sun is
what
there,
you're
the
saying,
moon is
Liat?
there, the stars is there. There is no change, right? The animals is there.
So okay, change aside. Change aside. What you're saying is actually true. Change aside, even if there's no change, there still has to be a constant recreation. That's the whole point. That's why this is
every day is new.
Right. So that's every moment, every millisecond, and that's why this is revolutionary. Because notwithstanding change, in order for the existence to exist, it has to constantly be willed into existence. So
this is what we were saying last time about like the cyclical nature of reading the Torah, that like we are willing it into existence every day, every year. I mean, and there's prayers for every moment. Like by engaging with this, by engaging with God's word, and God's words, like we are constantly living it and willing it into existence.
Yeah. So what you're saying is another product of understanding this and integrating it is appreciating. It's another like retroactive realization. Appreciating the quality of our life because of this. Of this principle that the world is being created every moment, we can appreciate the renewal in life, within life. And we celebrate that, and that's a huge part of our Jewish values that we celebrate because of this. This is the foundation, the core of that. It's all coming from this truth that the world is being constantly recreated. And just to finish up an understanding of chapter 1 is that it's coming through these energy packets of the letters. These letters are standing firm in the heavens. These letters get rearranged in myriads of combinations and scrambled up and numerical value codes. They're basically spiritual code for the world. So that was it with chapter 1. Chapter 1 was isolating that understanding that the world is being recreated through these letters.
But if the world is created by letters, there is a cheat code?
That's the Kabbalists. That's when the Kabbalists come in. That's what they're working with. They're working with the letters. They're working with that energy, right? And that's why, I mean, that the way of Chabad is not to practice that type of Kabbalah, is to practice the more theoretical understanding and just kind of accept and not try to mess with code. But there is the wisdom of Kabbalah. The other side of the Kabbalah is being able to mess with that code.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I say mess with it, nothing happens without the will of God. Just want to make sure that that's out there.
That's like the metaphysical and the nanotechnology and all these like different things. Like when you think about like the matrix and like all the numbers and all the things, it's like so much. It's so much Kabbalah.
Yes,
we end up being way before science. Science then catches up to us to see.
Absolutely. And then like I'm not going to claim to understand what is it called quantum physics, but like there's so much in that is like wow, like this Tanya and Kabbalah, and well, the Tanya is the teaching to us, but the teaching is eternal. It's part of the Torah that was given along with the written Torah, at Sinai. It was just secret, passed down and only to select few for thousands of years until the Alter Rebbe taught it to us. And as you know, as I've mentioned the story before, he got a lot of flack from that in his time for teaching it to the masses. He's like, this is secret. You can't teach this stuff. So this is ancient wisdom that's being now taught to us. So now for chapter 2. So chapter 1 is Hashem is constantly recreating the world to these energy packets of letters. Chapter 2 is taking this understanding to the next level, which is, let me just put this into words. And we also foreshadowed this a little bit in the last chapter because it's really hard to isolate it. And that is, what's behind those letters? God, right? What does it mean that God is constantly recreating the world? Now the question is why? Why does he have to recreate the world? And conventional thought, if you're not enlightened, if you can try to imagine you didn't have some of the enlightenment that you do have from studying Torah and from some of the more proliferated understandings that we're lucky to be having, is that God created the world once and it's on its own. in fact, the way that the Tanya words it in the very beginning, in the second page, it says, in order to answer, no, that's not it. That's actually on the first page. In order to answer the heretics. So when we talk about heretics, and this is what all the understandings of the Tanya, all the teachers that teach Tanya will all explain, that what does it mean that we're explaining to the heretics? Why do we care about the heretics? Actually, we're talking to ourselves. We're talking to that part of ourselves that says, well, what do you mean all the time created? Like, why is it so terrible to believe that God just created the world and now we're just in existence? Why that's not an outlandish thought. That's a very rational, logical thought. And why are we talking in this way? This is a little tangent. Because it's really important that we talk to the heretic within ourselves. And we don't shun it. And we don't say, no, you can't think that. Right? We have to engage with our inner heretic. Not to say that this thought is so, it's a logical thought, right? We have to engage with that logic within us. We have to engage. And Craig was actually telling me yesterday the story of Bela being on the mountain in Banff and saying, we're just like little pieces of God and God can, right? And that beautiful curiosity that she was showing, so developmentally appropriate. Right? We want to celebrate that. We want to stoke that curiosity.
Thanks God for being, when we do our gratitude at night, she says, thank you for letting me be Jewish.
Oh, it took me 4 years.
Just that's thanks to you. That is thanks to her mom.
Yes.
One thing I could do right.
You did it.
Yeah. So that's what we want to. We all have that 11-year-old within us that's questioning our existence, right? We're supposed to. That means that she's developing in the most healthy way.
Yeah.
That she's allowing those thoughts to come forth and that's bubble up.
Favorite part of Passover, the winter
right?
child.
It's so beautiful. I remember being that 11-year-old and questioning, why am I just believing what I'm told? These are really important developmental, and they're not just for childhood. They happen, I think, in preteen is the moment they get to really, they kind of are big at that time. But we constantly need to be asked. We have questions, and the Tanya is telling us we've got to talk to those questions. We've got to talk to that part of ourselves that questions. We've got to analyze. We've got to open it up, flesh it out, and that's what we're about to do. So, in order to understand why the world is not one and done, we've got to differentiate the creation of the world from the creation of human creation. So divine creation is completely different than human creation. Human creation, right? I have a mikvah, we're building the mikvah, and we have the carpenter putting together, may he please do his work, the countertops and everything, and he doesn't have to be there. Believe me, he's not there. He leaves, and it's whatever he did yesterday is still there. It's not disappearing, right? Why is it different for God? Pretty understandably, he's working with created material already. He's rearranging, right, molecules. He's taking a slab of wood and he's changing its form. But he isn't creating the wood. He isn't creating the marble, right? And when we cook, we're not creating, sodium chloride. We are putting the salt into the recipe together with the other ingredients and putting together a new mixture. So that, when you create something from something, you can leave that because you're not worried about the actual existence of the molecules and atoms. God created the molecules and atoms. From what? From what was before that? Well, I can't tell you, right? Because I'm human and I'm within the creation. I'm part of that creation. So I am not able to step outside of creation and tell you what's on the other side of it. I'm not privy to that. I'm subject to this. But clearly, it isn't the same thing to work within our world than to create the world from God's existence beforehand, there was nothing. Whatever nothing means, it wasn't world, it was nothing. So in order to will that existence through, it has to constantly be created. And now the Tanya is going to give us the classic example, famous example. It's going to show us one of the closest examples that we can from the world, from the stories of the Torah, from something we've learned about, we've seen, our souls have seen through time, to try and get an idea of it. And that's the story of the splitting of the sea. Okay, so the splitting of the sea is almost like an exhibit A of a something from nothing type of creation. Although it's not something from nothing, it's the closest we can get. So in order to understand this example, we need to first understand that this example is going to use the logic pattern of kal v'chomer. Right, this is one of the Talmudic logic patterns that gets used. And it means from easy to hard. So if you can understand that, let me give you an example. If you can understand terrible at examples. If you can understand this small thing to be true, then you can use those principles to how much more so that's true. So like here's an example. If it was hot at Lions Pool today at 10:30 in the morning, how much more so would be hot at 1:30 in the afternoon? Okay, so that's a kal v'chomer. Okay, if that's hot, then you would understand.
V'chomer?
Yeah, kal v'chomer. Yeah, kal means easy, chomer means hard. So from easy to hard. So now the other thing we need to understand in order to understand this example is that when God does miracles, a lot of times he chooses to perform miracles through nature. So if you notice through the miracles throughout time, and some are more, some are less, but the miracles throughout the Torah are not like magicians type of like abracadabra and then there was, right? Actually, that's how God created the world. Absolutely. But after the world's created, like think of the water turning to, it's not abracadabra, it's God tries to use a natural medium to do miracles even. So even the splitting of the sea was done through nature. Achiza b'teva, a hold in nature. Okay, so what does that mean? God did not split the sea. He did not say, sea, become stone. Right? The sea did not become stone. The sea stayed sea. It stayed water. The water was still water. And actually we're about to understand how that's actually a bigger miracle than if God said, become stone. Because stone, if God said, water becomes stone, it would be like, okay, now we've got two walls. Stone stands like wall, that's understandable. Water turned into stone, cool. But actually that's not what happened. In the Torah it says that God brought a wind from the east and it blew all night. And if you open up the Exodus in the Torah, you'll find the story said in this way. And it blew all night. And this wind blew the water to stand up like a wall. So the water stayed liquid. In fact, there's a midrash that the fish continued to swim in the water, and the Jewish people they were walking through an aquarium. It was beautiful. So that was one of the miracles. There's 50 miracles of the sea, right, that we read in the Haggadah. What's one of the miracles? That the fishies were swimming in the water and they got to watch all that. So the water's still water, but it's standing like a wall. So it's almost like an impossible, right? Impossible
thing.
Defying gravity. So how is it possible what did God do in order to make this liquid stand like a wall? He brought this east wind to push it into the wall. Now that's still a miracle because I don't know the last time you've seen a wind blow water into walls like that. And especially if you learn the details that it was 12 tunnels and all the different details of how it was. It wasn't nature, it was a miracle, but it was happening through nature. Yeah.
Can I just say something? I have read that before the splitting of the sea, there's 3 paragraphs, and these in the Torah, and these paragraphs, you see the 72 names of God that come from there. And it's so, going back to what you were saying, it's like God gave the code to make supernatural events.
I don't know that detail, but that sounds fascinating.
That's Kabbalah of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, there's
reading about
Torah's Torah is infinite, so
Right.
there's always more to learn. Like that sounds something like I've never learned before, and I'm curious. Yeah. If you want, send it to me. I'd love to read it. Yeah.
I think it's in
But
the-
it makes sense
yeah.
according to this context, right?
Yes.
Like we're talking about God using like this is like special energy coming to the world at this time. Like the splitting of the sea was a watershed moment for our people to be able to see God's presence like that. Now, of course, God is always present, but when God does something to defy nature, it's waking us up to be aware of it in a different way. And that's what I'm going to venture to say, that's why God split the sea in this way, so that we would have an inkling of an understanding of what it means for him to create the world. So if you're understanding where I'm going with this example, this mashal, this sea being an exhibit A of something from nothing, because the something is the water standing like a wall, and the nothing is the water flowing. So if the wind would stop blowing for a minute, the idea is that the water would go back to being flowing. So the constant flow of wind is showing us to make this water stand like a wall and still be water, is showing us that the world, for it to will in existence, it needs a constant flow of energy. A modern day example I like to bring, and I brought it last week also, is like when you're a screen, right? The best way I like to use it is if you're using a corded screen, because it's more descriptive that way. But you can apply the example even to battery powered and everything like that. But let's say you have a corded screen and you're watching a movie, and the movie is so real. And let's say it's a huge screen and you're lost in this plot and you almost feel like you're there and the resolution is so good, right? And all of a sudden somebody walks by and the cord gets pulled out of the wall and now it disrupts the flow of energy. Your whole alternate reality just disappeared, right? It's almost like these actors are there in the room with you, but they're actually not there. They're totally dependent on that flow of electricity. So that's a more modern example of this something from nothing existence. Our world is like a screen. The world is like this. It exists, but it's so dependent, and it's so dependent on this flow of godly energy. And in later chapters, we're rushing through this, but actually each of these understandings is mind-blowing. And slowing down into what that means, right? For us, that we are constantly being created, is there so much intentionality in that, right? It isn't that God created and then the world is just on its own to self-destruct. Yes, we have freedom of choice. Whoa, that's a whole other topic. But we are being created. We are wanted. If God did not want us to be here, he could just stop. He doesn't have to destroy anything. He could just stop and we won't be here. In later chapters, what I was saying was that we're going to start understanding some of the paradoxes that are going to come up as we really internalize this truth. And it's just, like I said, layer by layer by layer. But for today, we're going to soak up this idea that last week's chapter was we've got these energy packets coming through the letters. This week's chapter is if God were to stop sending this energy through, even for 1 minute, we wouldn't be here. And the chapter concludes with this idea of these energies. What is it? Through this godly energy, it brings it back home through the letters. Through the letters. It's coming through the letters. And there's this verse that says, V'ata mechaya et kulam. And you enliven them all. And the commentaries say, not just enliven as in make our bodies alive, but mehaveh. Actually, it doesn't only enliven us, it exists us, if that could be a word, like wills us into existence. The word. And the aleph, the ata, the word ata, is actually 3 letters. Like you can find this in the text of the Tanya. which will be helpful. So if you go to the second to last page, there it is. Ve'ata. That's it. You. You enliven us all. But really, it's not only enliven, it's you. Let's see how the Tanya translates that word mehaveh. Bring into being. Read not give life, but bring into being. You bring into being us all. And this word you, ata, it actually is a cool word because, again, Hebrew, right, is such a special language. It's the existence language. So there's no wonder that there is layers and layers in each word. And this word ata is aleph, taf, so the first letter of the alphabet to the last letter, and hey. Hey is the numerical value of 5. Aleph, bet, gimel, daled, hey, 5. 5 is the 5 organs of speech. There's the lips, and actually each of the letters of the alphabet are sometimes divided into the ones that are formed from the lips, like bet, mem, pe. The ones that are formed from the throat, the groniot, aleph, hey, het, ain, right? And then there's the ones that are formed from the cheeks, chaf. Oh no, this is the throat. Sorry, no, the back of the mouth, the palate, chaf. Then there is the tongue, lamed. So there's 5 of them. And these are the 5 organs of speech. So these letters are coming through, and what's really cool, this is very Kabbalistic, and it's also a foreshadow to future chapters that we're going to study in this book, that these 5 organs of speech represent gevura, strength, discipline. Think about it, because you're forcing, so if you just have straight up breath, it doesn't make a sound. It's just coming through without any sound. That's like chesed, energy without restriction. But when you restrict the sounds coming through in some way, then you get different sounds. So that's the gevura, the restriction. That it's like forcing the energy through a obstacle course of restriction so that we get world. Okay. And this energy actually is the same speech. This is the last understanding of this chapter. The same speech that creates world is actually, if you back it up in an earlier part of the chain where it comes from God through, right? If you back it up, it's prophecy. If you back it, the Torah is part of the same speech, right? It's almost like sound actually is recorded in different ways, right? You can have sound that you hear, and then you can have sound the way it looks on a CD, and the way it looks on a cassette tape, and the way it looks as an MP3 file, and the way it looks as sound waves, right? So that's the same idea, right? We are all the most physical manifestation of God's speech. Earlier manifestations would be the Torah, would be prophecy, right? It's all the same energy recorded in different ways. Which is, I find like fascinating, and also I get the sense of humility. Because I don't really it's like to comprehend what that actually means, right? It's like, whoa, there's a whole system, like spiritual system, creating what I take for granted every day. All this going behind the scenes. And think of like the prophets, right? Like I'm just imagining the prophets predicting the future, right? How do they know? How do they know? Or how are they speaking? Because they're privy to an earlier form of existence, of the same speech that is going to end up in existence. They're privy to it and earlier on. Not necessarily in time, but in form, right? In a plane of understanding.
So this idea if God were to stop, we wouldn't be here. Like if God were to stop these energies.
Yeah, and this is the point of the chapter, by the way. So
right.
Yes, if we had one takeaway, that would be it.
Is that death?
That's a really good question. No, it's not death. It's no existence.
Okay.
Right? Because death implies that there was an existence before. Death has a dead body. There's still a soul, right? According to our belief system. if God were to stop creating the world, it would be as if the world never existed ever.
But that's not, so you're saying that's not keeping individuals alive, it's keeping the world alive.
Yes, remember, there, in a general sense, yes. In a general sense, speech is creating the world. Mm-hmm. In a specific sense, in chapter 1, we learn that every single detail of existence is the result of a composite of letters. So even that, you can divide it into specifics, or you can talk about it in a general sense. But in order to create, like, the way I sometimes teach this to young children is like, what does God have to do to destroy the world? Does he have to bring a flood? Does he have to bring a fire? Does he have to bring, nothing. He has to do nothing. He has to stop doing. And then the world ceases to exist in the most complete way.
I think, and I wonder, since I haven't been here for all the first book, I think it's very easy then when you hear this, it's always being created, then why is there the most horrible things?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can get that there's things that happen in nature, and but then the worst atrocities that are happening, if he's continuing to breathe,
yes.
if he's continuing to speak it into existence, then how is that?
The answer to that, first of all, is not answerable,
yeah.
Right? But we have to always understand
say,
that, right? So. No, but the answer to that, the unanswerable answer to that, right? In other words, like the attempt to answer that is actually coming in later chapters of this book. It's going to be through the short answer is Gevurah, right? I foreshadowed it with the speech being right. So in order for us, this is like a spoiler alert for future chapters, more than one. In order to and that's great. It's really, like I mentioned, I had a really hard time with last week with chapter 1, because I'm not used to like isolating each understanding without bringing in like the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's understandable that we're going to need to bring the whole thing into our understanding, but then we'll go ahead and go through the practice of isolating it in our study, and I think we're really going to it's really going to serve us. We're going to grow from that isolation of like one thing at a time and just building it like that. Not to say that we also won't bring in, other stuff, or future stuff. So understanding this Gevurah, right? If God were to just give, let me say it in a different way. What we're going to be saying in the future is that without limitations, we wouldn't actually be in existence. Mm-hmm. With too much, I'm going to be vague on purpose, with too much energy, we would not live the way we're living now, with the ability to not tap into that energy. It would overwhelm us. So all of the short word for this is the tzimtzum, which is a construct of the Gevurah, right? It's all kind of part of the same type of energy. That in order, let me put it to you this way, it's almost like what's coming up for me right now, so I'll just share it, is like when you really wish you could give your kid the answers, but you hold yourself back from doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's almost painful. It hurts, right? Like you wish you could just, like, okay, I had my one of my children was doing an interview, right? And this child was getting tested by this teacher to see if they could pass or whatever, be accepted into a program. And I am the one teaching this child to prepare them for this milestone to be able to be accepted. And I'm there in the room while he's being tested. And I wish I could jump into him and just tell him, like, God, we learned that yesterday, like, say it. And I had to hold myself back and watch him make mistakes, right? And I can't say that I'm God, right? And this is what it's like for God. But that's what's coming up for me when I learn about Gevurah, right? And I learn about how God holds himself back from fixing for us, right? Because then we wouldn't have an existence. It would be God. It would be spiritual robots.
I
But I
think
think
Yeah.
a lot of times the atrocities are not coming from God, it's coming from human beings.
Well, that's it, and human beings
And
have
we
choice.
have free choice, we have free will.
So I jumped to assume that you're understanding we're talking about free choice.
Sure,
Yeah.
of course, we have free will. I mean, I just think though that's the argument, right? That it's like
Well, you
if
gotta
he's
go.
doing
Oh,
that, then
yeah,
how do
no.
we even have free will? He gave us free will.
Right.
I think
But
what
then-
you're saying is also right. There is the alphabet, right?
Mhm.
But there is also the 10 Sefirot. It's not just, I think it's both things. So it's not just the
It's not-
restriction, but it's also the endurance. It's also, you have to go through some things to...
So the 10 Sefirot, it's like, it's not 10 Sefirot and the alphabet, right? The alphabet is how we're coming through existence,
Yeah.
okay? The 10 Sefirot is what we're like. What does the existence look like?
Yeah.
And why do we look like that? Because because we mirror God, who God chooses to shine his energy through that as well. So I guess what you're saying, but it's not like, oh, we've got the letters creating us and we've got the Sefirot creating us. It's the letters, God's creating us through the letters, but what do we look like? We look like the Sefirot. We have Chesed, we have Gvura, we have Tiferet, and the two main Sefirot are Chesed and Gvura. And that's what we're going to be like grappling with in the later chapters. Chesed and Gvura. It's always this pull, tug, and push and pull.
Like without
tug
the
of-
letters, it will not be the 10 Sefirot.
But the letters are a form of Gevura,
Yeah.
right? Because they're taking God's energy and putting like limits onto it so that it has some sort of form, so that we feel a form. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.